So I mentioned large print books. Large print and larger print are the same thing, but they are not the same thing as just a regular size print book. So they need to be differentiated. And this can happen in a few different places. So I heard about the 340 earlier. You can also see this in a 500 note. There's a subject heading, larger type books, I believe it is. And probably most importantly, this information shows up in the fixed fields. So there's a place where this can be coded and it generates the fancy icon for larger print. So there are several different places where this can go, and the main thing you need is to have it in the fixed fields and then have hopefully one other place in the record where it says for people's viewing pleasure that this is large print. That could also be in the GMD. Fixed field number 1, GMD number 2, and then other places number 3 as far as priority of where you need to make sure that it says that it's large print. GMD, General Material Designator, that's the square brackets next to the title. The H subfield and the 245. Square brackets. For any of these, do not use a record for the wrong type of book. So if you have a large print, do not use the record for the regular print book, or vice versa, because they're not the same thing. When you don't have a record for that large print book, send it to a bibliographic cataloger, or put it on the shelf for a week and it'll probably be in your catalog by then. But don't try to force a square peg into a round hole. So in your fixed fields, if you want that larger print icon to show up, the book with the magnifying glass, you need to have the form field with a D in it. And you can see down in the 008 that shows up right after the designation of audience. So you see that D for the form being large print. And this creates that icon. So make sure that the icon is there. That's the first thing you want to look for. And if it's not, there's something wrong in here. And somebody needs to go add one little letter and everything will be okay. So we sort of talked about this with the large print, but it bears repeating. Never convert a record from one material type to another. Don't see that there's a DVD record and say, well, I've got a Blu-ray, but it's the same thing. I'll just stick it on here. When the patron screams at your coworker because they're not the same thing, they're not going to be happy. So don't take a record for one material type and just use it for another material type. And don't combine them on one record. So don't put the print book and the audio book on the same record. Don't put the DVD and the Blu-ray on the same record unless they're circulating together. In which case the record needs to reflect that they are both there. So when you run into these sorts of things and you can't find a record that goes with the material type you have, it's time to send it to a bibliographic cataloger. Don't try to force the square peg into the round hole. Just throw the square peg at somebody else and move on. Go to the next thing on your list. I mentioned earlier we were going to come back to this, some multi-part sets. So these, most of the time for you guys, what you're probably working with is DVD sets. So you've got a TV show, you've got the whole season, it's 3 discs, it's 6 discs, it's whatever. That's a multi-part set where you could potentially circulate each of the discs by itself, but they are part of a unit. Another example is an encyclopedia set where you might have 20 volumes that go together, but they're 20 volumes of the same thing. So you have one catalog record for the encyclopedia set, and then you have individual parts so that you can show how many volumes there are and that none of them can be checked out or whatever. By using the multi-volume or multi-part set function in Evergreen, you have a way to describe items more precisely than you would if you tried to just describe the whole and let people guess at the parts, or to describe each of the parts by themselves. So this is like the best of both worlds. You can describe the items very precisely while also tying them together as parts of the larger whole. And it makes it so your patrons can see that your library checks out the TV series the entire season at a time, whereas the library down the street checks out the TV series one disc at a time, and they can actually see the difference between these things and know what they want to put a hold on or go check out or visit or whatever. So what happens with this is that the set as a whole serves as your bibliographic record. So if you had season 100 of Law and Order, that's not right. It's got to be 150 by now. You've got season 100 of Law and Order. You're going to find a bibliographic record for season 100 of Law and Order. Then each of the discs in there, disc 1, disc 2, disc 3, each of those is a part of that. And you can decide at your library how you're going to handle those parts. That your patrons will check out all of the parts at once, or they will check them out one at a time, or maybe they'll check them out in groups of 2. You will figure that one out, and you can customize it for your library. That means that you, as a consortium, you can share the same record, but you don't all have to do the same thing. You don't all have to check out the entire season when that's not what works best for you at your library. So you'll have a record for each season, and then you'll have these parts that you can outline in different ways, and NC Cardinal is coming up with a prescribed vocabulary for this. But here's an example of what you might have. So say you're at Library A and you check out all the discs in the series at one time. Library B maybe checks out the discs one at a time. So 1, 2. So at their library, you can check out disc 1, you can check out disc 2, you can see the difference. And then you could even customize things further. So maybe Library C splits it in half. So they have discs 1 through 3 and 4 through 6, and you can do it that way. And then maybe Library D gets rid of disc 6 because it's all the extra material that isn't actually part of the season, and they just have you check out discs 1 through 5. Now everybody can check out whatever they want as part of that set. Use the same record, but still have that customization. Makes sense? So show up to get the vocabulary you want, or end up with what everyone else decides. Another thing, I heard a lot of you talk about, you're the ones who add the magazines and periodicals to your catalog. So this is especially for you, but everybody ends up having to do it at some point, right? So you will use one bibliographic record for a magazine. This means you do not create a new record every single volume that comes in, every year that it comes out. As far as name changes go, send that to a bibliographic cataloger because that gets complicated. Any other kind of artificial subdivision, you don't do it. You have one record for the magazine. So you get Southern Living. Southern Living has a record. Probably everybody in this consortium is using the Southern Living record. When you get the issue for August 2018, you will simply add that to that bibliographic record. This means that when your older copies need to be deaccessioned, or they've already been stolen, or whatever has happened with them, all you need to do is go into the catalog and delete that item and move on with life. The record stays there. You don't have to redo the record every single time something comes in. You don't have to redo the record every year by adding a year to it. And you still have that record, and it magically sits there and no one has to do anything with it. So, and that's a perfect thing for you guys as item catalogers to do, because that record, once it's been cleaned up, it'll stay fine for a long time. And all you need to do is pop your item on there, and every month there are multiples that you have to just pop on there, others that you have to pop back off. This makes that a lot easier. Graphic novels, these are also very special. Do not catalog your graphic novels as multi-volume sets. Sometimes they look like multi-volume sets. They're very confusing, but they generally don't work very well as multi-volume sets. So look for a record where the graphic novel you're looking at is the one thing that's being described in that record. Catalog each of those items separately. Make sure it includes a series statement, though, for how it ties in with the other graphic novels that go with it. So you've got, Batman versus the Joker, Volume 3. Well, you need to have that in the series statement so that you can relate it to Volumes 2 and 1 and 4 and 5 and whatever else is there. So if the series statement isn't there, go ahead and send that to a bibliographic cataloger. And you guys know, if you've worked with graphic novels at all, that chances are pretty good there are going to be problems with that record anyway. There's no exact right answer with any of this, right? We like to think that cataloging is going to be this science where you get the rules and the regulations and then everything's going to fall into place, and it's never like that. There's a lot of art to it.